Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today as we explore a day in the life of dissemination strategies for diverse communities. The Polaron team would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians throughout Australia and their continued connection to land, sea, and the community. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Before we begin, I'd like to start with the agenda. We will firstly introduce our panelists and hear from Polaron's founder before moving to our presentation, the panel discussion, and finally finishing with a Q&A. Just a reminder that we will answer all your questions and comments during the Q&A section at the end of this webinar. First off, I would like to introduce Polaron Language Services team leader, Alison Aguirre. Alison is a dedicated, innovative, and proactive individual known for her adaptability and collaborative spirit. Thank you for joining us today, Alison. We are also joined by our multicultural engagement and partnerships coordinator, Mary Vijdani. Mary is skilled in management teamwork, leadership, and marketing. It is great to have you here, Mary. Welcome. Finally, I also would like to give a warm welcome to Eva Hussain, the founder and director of Polaron Language Services. Eva is a certified translator, interpreter, and NATI examiner. She will be our moderator for our panel today. Eva? Hello, Eva. Good afternoon. There you go. Over to you, Eva.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, for this warm welcome, and a big hello to everyone from Europe, where I am with my other colleague, Carla, visiting our offices. So just very brief introduction to who we are and what we do. We've been around for the past 24 years. I think in November this year, we'll be celebrating a 24th anniversary. So next year, there's a bit of a bigger milestone. What do? We work with clients who require translation, interpreting, engagement services, multicultural strategies, with multicultural communities at the heart of everything we do. And that is true for every single one of us. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from Alison and Mary, as well as Kimberly. Because guess what? They work with the communities day in, day out, grassroots, go to events, network, and really know the people whom we serve, basically. So we do have a team of around 50 people across the world, as well as roughly around 1,500 NATI certified interpreters, translators, multilingual specialists, bilingual facilitators. So it's quite a large team and growing. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you, Eva.
We move on to the next slide.
Yep, now moving on to the next one. There you go. Why effective dissemination matters. Anything you can say about that, Eva?
Plenty. I can say plenty. And, many of us at Polaron actually have that lived experience of not understanding. And I don't think it's just the language. I think it's also the systems, the way that communication works in Australia, which is quite different than in the countries that we come from. Most of us were born outside of Australia. Many of us have one or both parents born outside of Australia. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Mary, who is the queen of networking and the queen of community. And truly, every time I meet with people that have met Mary, they are so positive about their experience with her. And that is because, Mary, you do know everybody and everything. Is that right?
Yes, thank you, Eva. So hello, everyone. I'll be presenting on why effective dissemination matters. Next, please. So, successful dissemination strategies make sure that important information reaches the right audience and is presented in a way that meets their cultural and linguistic needs. This approach is known to build trust and encourages engagement within multicultural communities, and it also establishes positive, long lasting relationships by keeping communication channels open. Next. The best practices for multicultural audiences are to ensure you tailor your content to your audience's language by simplifying the complex information and being mindful about linguistic nuances and cultural sensitivities. Next. So we at Polaron Language Services utilize many different dissemination types, including social media tiles, community engagement, multimedia videos, and fact sheets. All these examples were used to disseminate the Mental Health and Wellbeing Commission's resources into 5 languages or 5 communities, which were Arabic, Chinese, Punjabi, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Polaron provided specialist advice to the MHWC, which included recommendations like inclusion and critical importance of community, which would provide authentic feedback regarding the Commission's existing fact sheets and videos. Thank you. We also worked with the Victorian Fisheries Authority to help disseminate information about illegal fishing across Victoria. The Chinese and Vietnamese speaking communities were those who received the most fines from the VFA, and it was up to us to find better ways to communicate, better ways to educate, better ways to engage with the community. So we did 2 focus groups and the development of the recreational fishing guide in both Chinese and Vietnamese. We were able to help both communities better understand their legal rights when fishing in Victoria. So you guys can have learned some things today. So please practice and dissemination in your workplace, in your community, and your social environment. Please contact us today if you have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. And now moving forward, we have dissemination strategies for diverse communities. Any thoughts about what Mary mentioned, Alison, Aguirre, Eva Hussain? Anything we can say about?
Yeah, I think we went through some of the ways that we work. And also, Mary talked about one particular case study where essentially there's a community problem, whether it's domestic violence or illegal activity of some sort. Often communities have answers to the issues. It's just that you need to talk to the communities in a respectful way to get the insights about what something might be, why something might be happening. But often they'll also provide you with solutions. So the first step in developing a strategy for dissemination is really talking to the communities. And Mary outlined that really quite well, where the communities want to also take ownership and be empowered through the process. So one of the things I would add here, just in addition to what Mary said, is that it's really important to understand who you want to be talking to and about what specifically, and how to engage them in a authentic way so that they can create solutions to whatever problem you might have.
Yes, and also something to add there, working with diverse communities takes patience and understanding, but it's really worth the effort. By really getting to know each community, building the trust, and being flexible in how we communicate, we can make sure that this important information reaches to the people that needs it the most. So yeah, I really think it's important the way we try to communicate with them.
Thank you very much, Alison and Eva. And just to add with what everyone has said, I think a best example that I would also like to share would be resources during COVID, because there were elderly, there were young people, different nationalities, different backgrounds, and with the announcements constantly going on and being released, it was very hard to keep up. And yeah. I think it's very important that we consider different backgrounds. Thank you. So there you go. Eva, we have questions for today.
We do.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm going to take over from you, Kimberly. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And the first thing I wanted to discuss with Alison and Mary is what does effective communication look like? What are the key elements? How do we know that the communication is effective? Mary, I'll start with you because you are very experienced with your own communities, but also outside of that with multicultural communities. You have many years of experience working in different contexts. At what point do you actually know, okay, this communication has worked, it's been effective? How do you measure that? How do you tell?
Well, it requires a thoughtful approach that considers cultural and linguistic differences. We need to research and understand the communities we are targeting. This means looking at their cultural norm, values, and how they like to communicate. You just don't go to a organization and say, oh, this is what we do. You need to be able to show respect, show that you care, see them a couple of times, and gain that trust and gain that community well-being. It is also important to work with community leaders. They are the local individuals who are trusted and know their community well. Their insights will help us shape our messages, and they also are well received and meaningful. Being culturally sensitive is also a key factor. We must respect each other's traditions, community cultural traditions, and avoid stereotypes. Our language and images should include everyone, making sure no group feels left out or isolated or overlooked upon.
From my perspective, I believe that tailored communication starts with understanding that it's not just about translating words, it's about translating the meaning. So every community has a different cultural context, and we need to be aware of that when we are creating resources. For example, there are certain phrases or images that might resonate with one culture, but could be confusing for another one. Apart from that, we can also consider the format. Some communities might prefer written materials, while others respond better to visuals or audio formats. We found that in some cases, using storytelling or testimonials from the communities can be really powerful. Hearing the message from someone who looks like them, speak their language, and share their experience can be and have a much greater impact than a generic document. Another important part is testing. Before we release any communications, we test it with all small groups from target communities to make sure that it makes sense to them. And with this feedback, we can ensure that it's not just sending information, we are actually connecting with people in a meaningful way.
Great. And when you talk about meaningful way, Alison, what does that look like? What's meaningful way? What do you mean there?
Meaningful way means that we actually want to help them with the information that we are providing. So we are listening to them in if they really need to receive the information in a certain way, we can shape it so in that way that it can be comfortable for them to receive it.
Mm-hmm. And Mary, in your journey as a child of migrants and someone that's really connected to the community through faith leaders and community organizations and all of that, can you think of an example of when communication's been effective because it's been tailored well? What are some of the examples you could bring to the table?
Yes, I believe that if you are sending a message across to the community, making sure who is responsible and sending that information across, making sure it's culturally, and also if the community doesn't speak another language or are immigrants or refugees or asylum seekers to Australia, making the English or content in plain English or accessible in their language so everyone can be involved in the message that's being sent across.
So for example, and this is sort of going into your private life a little bit, apologies, but I know that you're quite connected with your local church. Is
Yes.
that a good way to disseminate information to some audiences?
Yes, that's true. We are trying to get more people involved, and I believe that churches and faith leaders and faith organizations, it can play a huge role in getting community activities across and information to the right source.
Because of course, communities, this is one of the things we tell clients, they're not homogeneous. It's not one group. So for example, Spanish speakers in Australia come from so many different countries, which is one thing. So they may speak with different accents, have different vocabulary, but also there are intersectionalities to who they are. So, there are people of different ages, different migration experiences. They may have different levels of literacy or digital literacy even. So, Alison, with, for example, your own Latin community, what would be some of the strategies that people can think about when we're tailoring communication? What do we mean by that, just within your own community?
So for the Latin community, what works the best, I'll say that is recognize the diversity within this group. So it can be simple Spanish, clear Spanish, and the channels that will work the best when it comes to disseminating information, it's WhatsApp, LinkedIn. So that's the way that they really receive the information. So if we want to communicate and connect with them, I believe that those will be the best channels.
Right. So that might, for example, look like what? So for an older Spanish-speaking person who's come here 40 years ago, you may actually need to go with printed materials. But for younger people of your generation, that could include something like, Instagram or. So you really need to think about, in other words, when it comes to this particular question, about who you're talking to, what are the learning styles, communication preferences, all of that, right? Because the message will not resonate with people if it's not written in the right way and it doesn't, I guess, go to them in a way that works for them. Like it's quite simple, yeah?
Yeah, some of them will ask better to tailor, for example, the kind of Spanish. There's a Spanish for Spain, a Spanish from different countries, and have different formats as well to receive that. But yeah, I'll say that it will work for younger generations like Instagram and those kind of channels, and for elders will work mostly printed or even face-to-face events.
And of course, what we're talking about here is that there's no recipe for communication or for, it really needs to be tailored. Like if you want to achieve a result or have a call to action at the end of it, so whether it's a health message or a legal message or whatnot, if you want people to act, you actually need to go to them. You need to know who you're going to, but also reach them in the right way, which builds trust that Mary spoke about. But also helps people do whatever it is that you want them to do through the messaging. Mary, I know you personally quite well because we work together. But I also know that your generation, so we're talking about people that are born in Australia with parents that were born outside of Australia, sometimes that meet in the sandwich, right? Meaning that you often will be in charge of communication for your entire extended family. And I know that you do a lot of advocacy for your mom, for your dad. How can people that are second generation or first generation born in Australia be those conduits? Like, what advice would you give to our clients who are listening about how to engage you or your generation so that the information can get to your parents or even grandparents?
Okay, so I would say when your parents are teaching you your culture or your language, please continue learning because I can only speak Farsi, but I can't read or write. So
Okay.
I would love to, if I had the chance when I was younger to actually continue learning my culture and my language, I would do it. That's my chance gone, even though I can learn now. But I think one more thing would be is, you know, once you get older and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, or it's too much or something like that, you realize how much your culture and your values in your community matter. And you just want to do something, but you can't. You find it hard to communicate, or you find it, or that you need a translator with you, but or to with your mum or dad, but then you're like, oh, I could have done that myself. But I think that's something that you can take on for future, but always remember who brought you into this world and, respecting your elders, and they are the future and they have lots of knowledge, so definitely take it on board.
Yeah. And I think, by having conduits or advocates like you, organizations need to think about how to tailor the message for you so that you can pass it on. Because oftentimes there'd be language barriers, but also cultural barriers or people relying on one person in the family for disseminating information. So sometimes if you are wanting to make inroads into a community, you need to think about Mary or people like Mary who are, born here, educated, brought up here, very Aussie, of course, but they are the people that are holders of that communication pathway. So I think I just wanted to leave people with the message of just remembering that sometimes the community can be assisted by people from within the community and outside of the community. So I think we move on to the next question, but thank you, Mary and Alison, for sharing that. That's really helpful. Mary, I'm sorry, but I have to go back to you. You are very involved in the community, and you've seen things translated, and whether that's printed or things like posters, fact sheets, brochures, whatnot, or online. How do you see the role of the community? At what point do they need to get involved to make this an effective and an efficient way? So, we see a lot, governments are really bad at that. They're like, okay, what are the top 10 languages? Let's translate everything for them and we put it on our website. That is not the way to do it, Mary, is it?
No, it's not. So I think by including local members, we gain cultural insights and that ensure translations are both accurate and culturally relevant, avoiding potential misunderstandings that direct translations might cause. Now, this local input also boosts the trust and credibility of the translated material, as information examined by trusted community figures is more likely to be accepted and used. Now, community members play a huge role. We all know that. It's a key role. But by identifying effective distributional channels, such as local media, community centres, events, ensuring materials are reached for the intended audience through the most effective means. Their involvement also helps leverage existing networks for broader and more efficient dissemination. When community members feel invested in the translation process, they are more likely to be actively supported and they will want to share the information by fostering a sense of ownership and collaboration that enhances the overall impact of the translated materials. By integrating community perspectives and leveraging local networks, we can ensure that translations are more accessible, trusted, and widely distributed.
Really great points there, Mary. So essentially what we are saying there, just to kind of summarize what you've said, is that it's just really not enough to do, translation in the old kind of format, I guess, and either put it on a website or print it and leave it somewhere at the reception, because people don't engage with that. And one of the reasons is that our communication needs and styles have changed drastically over the years, all of us. So it cannot be expected that just because, you speak a language, that your communication needs are different. And that also, and I'll bring Alison in here as well. And that also involves things like creating resources in different ways. So co-creating them with the community, but also creating things like videos, podcasts. Could you talk us through this a little bit, Alison?
Yes, so to create this and build the trust, it doesn't happen overnight. So if we show commitment and we co-design these projects with hands with a community member, it will help us to gain the trust and also listen actively with them. For the projects that we have done previously, our first step is also engaging with community members and community leaders. So showing the respect to them, organizing everything with the community and being consistent, not only approaching to them once we need something, be consistently in events, I don't know, like celebrating an important day in the community. And so, yeah, we always try to involve community members in developing these resources. And by collaborating with them for materials or events, we create this sense of partnership.
And that's a really good point you're making there. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, apart from that, we also need to always be clear and transparent with them. Let them know what are our intentions, the goals, and limitations. So this transparency also can build a credibility and it help us to manage the expectations as well.
And I think it's also fair to say, Alison, that if something is created in collaboration with the communities, it's more likely that they will embrace the resource. And if they know that they exist because they helped make it, there's a higher chance of people disseminating it because they're proud of that effort. So a really good example, at the moment, we're working on a really massive project for our Department of Home Affairs. And as part of that, we have had a say in how the campaign was developed and rolled out. Like we have a working group and community advocates, and like it's a massive project. But one of the things we're doing at the moment is rolling out some events in the community. And we have participated in taking photos of community members, because one of the things that we know is that stock images or cartoons don't always work with the community. So we wanted people, real people, that could be the face of the campaign. And one of our people that was in the photo, excuse me, Reina, she's a superstar. She, I kid you not, has got 98,000 people following her on Facebook. She's like a celebrity in the Indian community. But by having her part of the campaign, facing the campaign, and then coming to the event, she was taking photos, she was spreading the word. Like it's a really effective tool when communities are really engaged, involved, and they feel like they're being respected and they're in charge of that communication. I think that's a really good way of having that message that really, really resonates by having representation. So visually and every other way, but also by people that work on the project being involved, because they can carry that message and take it to the community in a very effective way as well. Cool. I think we're ready for the next question, Kimberly. Yeah, we touched on to this a little bit, but what are some of the challenges, Mary, with dissemination?
Yes, so One major challenge is cultural sensitivity, as resources must align with evolving cultural norms and avoiding stereotypes. Language barriers also pose significant issues, requiring high quality translations that are clear and relevant and consider different literacy levels. Some people may not have the same literacy levels. So it would be really good to make sure whatever we're sending out into the community, translations are clear and understandable for the target community. Another would be access and equity, which are crucial, with attention needed to address the economic barriers by providing resources in multiple formats at no or low cost. Because some communities may be needing this information, but it may cost some money. So if you can be in no cost or low cost, that would be great. Also, another vital key challenge would be feedback collection. Feedback, everyone loves feedback, but when we do get feedback, not many people, in surveys or, online, they just like want to finish it quickly. But sometimes you've got the true people that, yes, go through it 1 to 5, make sure, did you enjoy this program? No, I didn't like it. This gives us feedback. So it really is for the continuous improvement by challenging potential language and cultural barriers. Also, another point would be also legal and ethical considerations around privacy and consent, which must be respected, particularly with sensitive information in communities.
Yes, and I don't know if I can also add something there. So the first thing that comes to my mind when we talk about challenges in disseminating resources to diverse communities is that we often talk about diverse communities like it's one group, but the reality is that there's so much diversity within that. Each community has its own languages, cultural practices, and also ways of consuming information. For example, one group might be primarily rely on social medias, but another can have and prefer printed materials or even face-to-face communications. So we can just translate something into another languages and then call it a day. We need to consider things like, does this language really reflects the way that community actually speaks? Are there any cultural nuances that we need to be aware of? So we need to ask ourselves before doing the project. Another big challenge is also access. So many communities, especially older generations or recent migrants, might face barriers like limited digital access or low literacy rates. Even the platforms we use, which is to share information, can be a great challenge, whether it's online, through community groups, or that can make a huge difference in the message and how it gets through. So one of the solutions is to really engage with the community early on and ask them what do they prefer and what works best for them.
Yeah, and those preferences can also be diverse and varied because, just because Alison is from Peru and Carla's from Peru and they're roughly the same age, doesn't really mean that they have the same immigration experience or needs. And for that reason, it can be quite difficult to get it right. And like one of the challenges is the diversity within that diversity that you both spoke of. And, it's also important to remember that we're never going to get it 100% right. And not everyone's going to be happy or included. But I think the first step, and you've mentioned that throughout the presentation, is to really understanding the community. Who are we talking to? What are the numbers? Where do these people live? Where do they hang around? Do they prefer WeChat or Instagram, whatever it may be? Because once the resources are created in the right way, then the dissemination is what will make the campaign effective. And I think you, Alison, have mentioned measuring of efforts, and also you, Mary. And that is one of the biggest challenges because we don't always know what people are going to do. because some of these territories are kind of untested waters. So, we cast the net wide sometimes and hope that people are going to latch onto the information, but that's not always the case. So we advocate for people to stop and think, okay, who am I going to be talking to? Again, I'm repeating myself, about what, why, and what action do I want them to take? So I think simplifying things to the point where we say less but better is the key, so that we don't flood people with information. Like people have attention spans of ants. I know I do. So like I need everything chunked. I need videos. I need content that's really targeted so I can take action. And I think that's one of the challenges, including measuring of the effort. What's worked, what didn't work, how many people looked at the resource, how many people took action. That's sometimes a bit hard to measure. Guess what? We only have 10 minutes, but dozens of questions online. So I'm going to hand over to Kimberly to see what people want to know. It's been a very popular webinar, so thanks, Mary and Alison, for coming and sharing your perspective and experiences. But now it's question time. So we go on to the next slide and we hand over to Kimberly, who is also a bit of a superstar when it comes to community involvement, from international students to the Filipino community. So Kimberly, what do people want to know?
Thank you very much, Eva, for that very kind introduction. And once again, thank you, Allison and Mary, for your contribution today. Now, moving on to the question and answer, we have 8 questions from our attendees. Let's go to the first one. There are communities within communities. How do you know whether you are only connecting with one community and missing out on another?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'll let Alison and Mary to contribute in a moment, but I will say that sometimes in communities there are gatekeepers for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes it's the ego, sometimes it's just how the community is structured, that may be not the best conduit. So you do need to look for creative ways of reaching communities that are often multi-layered and not the same. So we've covered that a little bit earlier, but like if somebody says to me, okay, we want to translate into Spanish, my question is, what Spanish? There are Spanishes. To which community? Like, where do these people come from? Where do they live? What do you want to achieve? So it isn't easy to get to the level of dissemination that's very inclusive. And maybe I would go as far as saying it may not be possible even, because some people just don't engage online. There are lots of people that are isolated in the community. There's all kinds of reasons why you can't. So remembering that it cannot always be like 100% perfect outreach is also important. But also asking people from different with different perspectives and different ideas at the outset will give you that understanding of who is the community, whatever that means. Who are the community leaders? Who are stakeholders, influencers? With some communities and, the younger generations, there are people with extremely effective reach through social media. So it's also important to know. Alison, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, one way to tell if you're really connecting with one group is listening to feedback and observing also the engagement levels. If one part of the community is actively engaging, attending to events, asking questions, and responding positively, while other is silent or distant, that can be a sign to or a message that we are not resonating with everyone. So we need to hear directly from the leaders or members, but as Eva mentioned, it's not 100%. We're not gonna reach out to 100% of the community.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I guess it's no different than mainstream. You can't hope that your message, whatever it may be, will work for everybody. So it's just a little bit harder because there are language barriers and, communities have their own ways of working. But it's not possible. It's just, we need to be mindful that we may not be able to reach everybody every time. Next question, Kimberly.
Thank you. So the next question would be, are we allowed to send out translated material to our own community after it has been published?
Yeah, I think not only allowed but encouraged would be what I would say. I think if this question is from a translator or interpreter, by all means, I being one, I have the greatest respect for interpreters and translators. They often are a conduit to the community. So that's not to say that they should wear a different hat all the time, because being an interpreter and translator, you do need to be impartial and independent. But if you know that there's something that you've translated that could really work for your community, by all means, and we encourage people to do that. Just bearing in mind that there are ethics of the profession where sometimes information may be confidential, but like if it's public knowledge, we would love for you to spread the word, because then it comes from a very reliable source. Being a translator, you have maybe worked on the translation, so you know all the ins and outs of the messaging, and then you know the community. If you're an interpreter every day, you work with community members. So by all means, yeah.
Thank you, Eva. Moving on. Which method should we use for community connection for local government?
Okay. So local governments are super connected, or should be super connected, I should say, to the grassroots, because they're the basic levels of government. And when I say basic, I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean it's a very strong connection, because local councils will know, should know who lives there, what languages are spoken. Mary, are you connected with your local council in Southeast?
Yeah, so we have Monash Council. I'm also on the border of Greater City Dandenong and City of Casey and Knox. So I'm in between, but I'm in Monash. And
Yeah.
yes, so I think all councils have all that information. And if you just go in and say that I have this project or I have this idea, they'll connect you with the right people to speak to.
Mm.
And it can even lead to a project or even a community event if they're really interested in your idea.
And I think one good thing that I have seen happening more and more is where local councils actually collaborate. So you mentioned City of Casey, but there's also Cardinia and Greater Dandenong. So for people from outside of Melbourne, these are most diverse areas of Australia, actually, with lots of new and emerging communities. And seeing that collaboration across different councils is just wonderful, because many people might work in one but live in another. Maybe their kids go to schools. So like looking at an entire region and seeing how those connections can be made is really, really important. And, oftentimes your local council is the first go-to institution for people as they arrive in Australia, as they settle, but also for service providers to know who's there, who's out there, because some people might be using council services, but it's a wonderful, it's a great way to connect to communities for sure. I think we might have, we've got 2 minutes. How quickly did this webinar go, Mary and Alison, huh? Just like that. So we have maybe time for 1 or 2 more questions, Kimberly. Thank you.
Yep. So maybe I'll just share 2 more questions. So how can organizations assess whether their dissemination strategies are effectively reaching the intended audiences?
Yeah, that's a question that's a great question to ask. The answer is that there are elements of what you as an organization should be doing from the outset to measure that. Because, really, if you think about it, strategies and campaigns can be quite expensive, when they include translations or, reaching into the communities. You want to be sure that they actually work. So Mary has mentioned surveys. They need to be done in language in a way that community can actually complete them, right? You make it easy to do. So nowadays you can have QR codes. You can go to events. You can really engage with the community. some of it cannot happen from behind a computer. I wish I could say, yep, this is the button you press. It just doesn't work like that. You really do need to go out. And some of this input can be qualitative, some can be quantitative. But to know whether a campaign is effective, the best measure is to know whether people are taking action, whatever it may be. So if you want people to, I don't know, attend an event, you'll measure that by how many people turned up or how many people you invited. If it's, booking an appointment with a physiotherapist, that's how you measure it, right? But when you design and develop your campaign, these are the kinds of things that you need to really consider. Because otherwise it's a little bit pointless, right? Like, yes, we can translate, yes, we can develop things, but it's about what people are going to do with this information. That's really key. So when you're designing the campaign, if you also build in KPIs, and they don't have to be complicated or like really difficult to set up. There could be 3 things that you want to know about your campaign, about your audience, and how people have taken action. And that can range from, as I said, attending event, downloading things from the internet, how many people have watched videos. But ultimately, it's what people are going to do with your information that matters. So do we have one more question?
Thank you, Eva. So last question maybe. How do you handle translating information without losing the main message?
Goodness, I will take that one on just for the sake of time because we are a little bit out of time. Look, you need to, first of all, you need to work with NAATI certified translators based in Australia because these people know the context, they understand the language, they understand the community. Do not send it overseas. There may be wonderful translators outside of Australia, but they will just not understand the community. So that's number one. Secondly, have a second NAATI certified translator check the work. Because guess what? When you developed your resource, there was a process behind it of quality, of writing. Lots of people contributed. So you cannot expect one translator to do justice to your work, but also involve community. So when I talk about that, I don't mean for the flyer for your barbecue. That you can get your bilingual worker to do. But like when the message is important, you need to involve professional translators, potentially interpreters as well as bilingual people from the community that can tell you how to fine tune it, how to really make it resonate, and how to disseminate it as well. So like there's a process behind the scenes. So it's important to do it with the community, with the translators that know the community. It's a collaborative effort, and you'd only do it for the key types of information that's really important. But I feel like I've talked a lot throughout the webinar, so I'm going to hand over to Alison and then to Mary to finish off with some insights and points.
Yeah, so I believe what you said, Eva, is really great. To translate information without losing the main message, we need to work with NAATI certified translations who understand both languages. But firstly, we'll need to know the purpose of the translation. So we always, when we have a project that we need to translate, we always ask, what do you need this translated for? Once we understand the message, we pass it to our NAATI certified translators, and then we also work in partnership with community members. After that, we test the translations within a small group for the target audience, so it can help us to spot any issues. And lastly, but not, we can also keep the feedback open for any adjustments that we can receive, and in that way, we can ensure that this message is not lost.
The last word goes to Mary and then to Kimberly. Over to you, Mary.
Thank you, guys. So I really think that, there's no right or wrong question. If you want to really target an audience or a community, do your research before going and distributing information, number one. Number two, always, if you want to do feedback, we've got all the technology these days, QR codes, pen and paper, just approach someone. Hey, I'm Mary. Would you like to do this survey. It's only going to take 2 minutes of your time. Oh, no, I'll do it later. No problem. At least you gave it a go. I think having that confidence and making sure you know who you're speaking to, and also, having that time. If you have that time and energy you're going to put forward to the community, that time and effort will come back to you. So thank you guys.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant insights. We're out of time, so Kimberly, over to you, and just a very, very big thank you for participation, Alison and Mary. I know that this is the first time for both of you being part of this webinar, but you did so well, and I think everyone's very, very appreciative of your insights and input.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Alison, Mary, and Eva. And to all our viewers who submitted their questions, our apologies, we cannot answer all your questions, but you can always contact us. So you may reach out to Alison or Eva, and please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. So please scan the QR code so we can answer your questions. And once again, thank you for joining our webinar today.
And thanks, Kimberly, for hosting. Take care, everyone.